Oh, yeah. You caught me again. Every day. Come on.
Good morning. Good morning, Timothy, and everybody watching us on this beautiful Sunday morning. It is January 25th. And once again, we're reporting from the two different sides of the Tokyo Bay. Timothy is in Chiba and Katsuyama on his beautiful boat. I'm in Tokyo, and we're very pleased to welcome you and say thank you for being with us. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One. This is the 259th episode, and next week we're going to celebrate the fifth year, the fifth anniversary of, the beginning of this podcast. Timothy, good morning again, and it's on you.
Good morning, Maya. Thank you very much. 159 episodes, and next year is our fifth year together. That's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, yes. I know that for you it has been really a strenuous period. Every Sunday morning, 8:20, it's been really tough.
Dealing with
and I'm
you,
grateful.
My God. Yes. So today, Maya, as usual, I'm reporting from below decks on the good ship Grimm's. It's a beautiful day outside, blue sky. It's crisp and rather cold. Western Japan is getting hammered with snow and a real cold front. It is a bit nippy here, but it's still nice, and the weather's it's not good sailing weather today. But I'll be doing work on the good ship, preparing for the full-on sailing season, which kind of launches in February and particularly in March. But today I'd like to talk about particularly the election cycle. The Diet opened on Friday and immediately was closed down. And then the Speaker of the House announced that we would be going for an election cycle. That election cycle starts on Tuesday in 2 days. And so all of the seats of the lower house will close. They will evaporate. And everybody, all 465 members of the lower house will be candidates. And there'll be more than that. There's probably maybe, by rough analysis, it's about 2.5 candidates for every seat. But that's a little bit off because some seats are a gimme. The person that's holding the seat is too strong. Nobody's going to challenge him. But there are other seats that are contested, and they might have 4 or 5, sometimes 6 candidates vying for that position. But that's the main thrust of what I'm going to talk about today. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on for the February 8th election, and then what happens after that, and what's going on with this Prime Minister Takaichi, and some of the design and some of the motivations for holding this snap election. Very unusual. I'd like to get into those details and then handle your questions. So this is going to be somewhat impactful, mostly on with regard to the election and the election cycle and what's going on right now. We can't tell you how many candidates there are. The candidate cutoff is on Monday, and then the election process starts on Tuesday. So if your name isn't there, if you haven't been processed through the particular party, unless you're running as a independent, all names will be closed off, close of business tomorrow. So it's going to be a very active week, 12-day cycle. So next week we will be in the middle of the campaign, and then that's our 5th year anniversary. And then the week after that will be the election day. So let me turn it back over to you, Maya. I'll get into the beef of the details, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Thank you, Timothy, and to everybody watching us. Please let us know that you have been here. Share your thoughts, comment on the platform which you are on, and also hit like. And if you think that these briefings can help your friends or colleagues or maybe family members as well who are doing business in Japan, please share them with the briefings with them. And by doing this, help us spread the word about the briefings. Also, I wanted to say again, on February 11th, it will be 3 days after the election day. So we are going to have a very special guest on the podcast. Mr. Glen Fukushima will be here with us, and we'll be talking about trends in the Japanese economy, and also research and development, and also innovation. Please save the date, and remember that it is going to be on Wednesday morning, February 11th at 8 o'clock. And of course, you can watch it later on, because the briefing, the podcast will stay online. And it is going to be really an interesting week, because I believe that we are going to see then the formation of a new government, right? And there will be also, I imagine, other exciting events. Hopefully they are not exciting in the bad sense of the word. So, Timothy, yes, one more thing. And these briefings are also, how can I put it, popularized, let's say, with through a newsletter, which is sent out after the briefing is over, a couple of days after that. And you can subscribe for the newsletter on Substack. If you haven't done that yet, please find Langley Square there, or just let me know that you want to be on the mailing list, and then I'll add you to it. Timothy, it's over to you again.
Okay, Maya, you forgot to tell everybody, since we promoted it so much, the movie night, which was this last week on Tuesday night. Yes. About a half a dozen of us got together to go watch Avatar.
Yes, Avatar. We watched Avatar. It was a wonderful night, very relaxed. And Avatar was so full of action. Unbelievable, really. But yes, please. Okay, please keep tuned.
There goes your cat, giving me a little bit of tail.
Yes, stay tuned, because the next movie night is coming in February as well.
That's right. Once a month, the first Tuesday of every month, it looks like. And the next one, everybody wanted to go to.
Please be careful. The last Tuesday.
The last Tuesday. Everybody wants to see Kokoho, which looks like it's going to be nominated for an Academy Award. They spent a lot of money on the production. The acting is fantastic. The storyline is great. And so it looks like that is the movie that we will be going to as a group in 3 or 4 Tuesdays.
Yes, indeed. Okay, yes, that's for the moment. And let's move into the details, because there is so much to talk about. People are curious. I'm very curious too, because
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Okay, so Maya, this is not just an election cycle. This is a forced reset of Japan's political system, and it is being executed at speed. At no other time in Japanese political history since the end of the war, and probably before the war, have we been in such a really tense, decisive situation. The Prime Minister dissolved the lower house on Friday, January 23rd, the day that the Diet opened. It opens for the session. The constitutional session starts in January, must run 150 days. The Prime Minister crossed the moat, as he is required to do based on the Constitution, and opens the Diet. And then they closed the Diet immediately with the announcement that there would be an election of all of the lower house. So business started, and then it stopped, and then everybody went back to their various election districts to begin their campaign. It's a 12-day national sprint towards February 8th. That is the election day on a Sunday, and this is happening barely 3 months into Takaichi's premiership. And that alone should tell you something really important. This is not reactive politics, it's preemptive politics. She is a different kind of prime minister than we have seen in many, many years. And I think she is going to grab this bull by the horns and run with it. Everything this morning flows from that decision of hers. The election map, the budget risk, the yen, party alignment, geopolitics, and the historical baggage that is quietly resurfacing beneath it all. Everything is related to each other. So let's start with the sheer mechanics of the election. The lower house is 465 members, and there will probably be about 1,500 candidates expected nationwide. And it's not a polite contest, it's a full body contact sport. And for 12 days, the lower house members will have no status. They are not incumbents. All of them are candidates. So campaigns are very expensive. They're exhaustive and unforgiving. There will be sound trucks throughout the nation. You will hear them if you're in Tokyo. There are several, I think there are 15 seats in Tokyo alone. So there'll be a lot of sound trucks. Each member, each campaign candidate can have a sound truck. They can't have two, they can only have one. And there are certain rules about decibel levels, about times of day. But just as a consequence of how people vote, they're supposed to write the name of the candidate by hand, the proper kanji. If they mix up the kanji or if they leave one stroke out, it's an invalid vote. So as you hear the sound trucks, and this will start, on Tuesday, they keep repeating the candidate's name over and over again, and it's a kind of a way to embed it into the mind, so when the curtains close and you're making your vote, that name begins to come up, maybe subliminally, but there's a process for that madness. The poster boards have already gone up. You can see them in the neighborhoods with the numbered slots. That means each slot is for a candidate. So not all of the slots will be filled up, but when they make the poster boards, they don't know how many candidates they're going to be. So they kind of guess. And then when the candidates are decided on Monday, then their campaign supporters are supposed to staple up their faces in all of the campaign poster boards throughout their election district. But it's a nationwide vote, and there are zero margins for missteps. This is a big deal. It's a fight between the LDP and everybody else. In order to win, the LDP is kind of coalesced with Ishin. Maybe there's good legs on that. We don't know yet. But the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito, as a consequence of this, joined forces, and they've kind of stumbled into a new party. And that carries, its own baggage as well. Japan is unusual among parliamentary democracies because it has 289 single-member districts and 176 proportional representation seats. So that means that nearly 38% of the lower house is decided by a party vote and not by a candidate vote. What that means is when you're on the proportional list, and that's 38% of all the people who are voting, when you're on the proportional list, you're not particularly voting for that individual, you're voting for the party who is supporting a list of individuals. So for the party vote, and that's why when we talk about the polls that come out, the prime minister has a 70% approval rating. Her cabinet has about a 63% approval rating. The LDP is receiving rather high marks from the population. It is over 50%. That's why that poll comes out pretty frequently, because when there is an election, the proportional representation is dictated by the popularity of the particular party. So you can imagine that some of the minor parties, they don't have the branding, they don't have the carry weight, they're not running the government, so they're likely to have less attention in the proportional seats, and that's 38%. On the other side, people are running for the district on their own name. Please vote for me because I stand for this, and I belong to this, and I've done this, and I wrote this, and please vote for me because the other candidates don't compare. So that's that's the other portion. That's about 40% of the voting candidates as well. So the strategic bet is it's reasonable to assume that Prime Minister Takaichi and her chief advisor, a fellow by the name of Imai Takaya, they calculated the following: that even if the LDP loses some single-member districts, her personal popularity combined with the disciplined party branding could deliver strong proportional representation returns. In other words, lose narrowly in districts with decisively winning in the proportional representation and still come out overall on top. That's the gamble. And this is a high-level modern electoral calculation. It's not a gamble made lightly, but it is indeed a gamble. And the reason it's a gamble is because for the last 2 or 3 administrations, Suga, Ishiba, even you could say with um, um, the other prime minister, they didn't really have, the LDP didn't really have a firm hold on the diet, on the lower house and on the upper house. And so the prime minister has decided, I can't really govern this country by not having at least 50% in the lower house, and I don't have near 50% in the upper house. But to pass bills, they has to pass the upper house, has to pass the lower house, sometimes the lower house first and then the upper house. The bet here is, all the cards are on the table. Let's go for a snap election. Komeito has broken as a consequence of this calculation that has been made. And in fact, the election of Ms. Takaichi triggered Komeito leaving the coalition. So 26 years is in the basket. They're no longer affiliated with the LDP. They've become affiliated, in fact, so much so with the Constitutional Democratic Party that they've formed a new party. This is kind of stumbling forward. You can say it's a good step forward for Komeito or for the Constitutional Democratic Party, but I think for voters, it's kind of stumbling into this situation. It's not a situation that was created as a natural consequence of forces. It was forced into it for protection, for defensive purposes. So for 26 years, Komeito voters reliably supported LDP candidates. There are many districts where Komeito doesn't have a candidate, but Komeito is there. They're throughout the country. They're not like Ishin. Ishin wants to be a national party. It is not quite. So it doesn't have candidates to run in all the districts. And similarly, Komeito, which is probably more, it's been in existence longer than Ishin, and it does have a national following because it's based on a kind of a religious underpinning. So there are people throughout the country that vote Komeito, and they vote the way Komeito asks them to vote. Komeito sends out a bulletin, or it's in the newsletter that is sent out to all the members. We are voting this way for this reason, and in your district, since we don't have a candidate there, please vote for the LDP candidate because we're sharing issues and we're sharing affinity. That no longer exists. Some of those voters will still vote with Komeito when Komeito says, we don't have a candidate, but instead of voting for the LDP guy, vote for the Constitutional Democratic Party guy. That's a little bit hard to expect for members and for voters. So that machinery is gone. But more than 50 city seating, or since Friday they were seating, more than 50 LDP members depend on that Komeito vote. So when that vote goes now to maybe the Constitutional Democratic Party, if all of them went, then certainly 50 members will lose. But it's not absolutely certain that Komeito voters will vote for somebody in the Constitutional Democratic Party that they know or they don't know, or even for a Komeito person that is just up and coming to fill in a gap, or to vote for the LDP person who they've voted for the last 26 years. I mean, it's a lot to expect from somebody. So it's a real toss-up. What's going to happen with this coalition of Komeito and the Constitutional Democratic Party? And the election will not be won by ideology alone. It'll be won by organized discipline, turnout, and confusion management, certainly. So the weather is really going to be play a role here. It's somewhat cold here, and as I mentioned, Western Japan is getting hammered. There's a cold front that's going in. There's tons of snow hitting certain portions in Hokkaido and in Fukui. But it's non-trivial that the weather does make a difference. And snow or severe conditions tend to depress turnout, as you might expect, and it favors disciplined, older, organized voting blocks. So historically, low voter turnout benefited the LDP and Komeito because they're the standard fervent members. High turnout benefits opposition parties and protest parties. So if the weather suppresses the casual voters, the smarty parties will suffer and the swing voters will stay at home and the core organizations will dominate. And this could quietly tilt the battlefield. I think that probably went into the calculation too. February 8th, January, February are the coldest months of the year. And then March comes in really quickly and starts, the place starts heating up, flowers start blooming, it starts buzzing. But it's going February 8th election. A lot will tell from what the weather is going to be like. So, but now on to the other calendar problems. So we never expected the prime minister to close down the House because she decided, or the machinery decided, to open the Diet later in January than we anticipated. We said here on this program that if the Diet opened earlier in the month, like maybe on the 8th or 9th, right away, right after coming back to work from Oshogatsu, that would be a signal that the prime minister is going to close down the House, because there's so much time that's eaten up by an election campaign. In fact, they opened the Diet on the 23rd. That's a normal time to open the Diet, and it's not a really good time to hold an election and pass all the bills that have been piling up. So we never thought that there would be a snap election. So now the lower house must pass the budget that they're required to pass every year. They have to pass it by March 31st in order to give the upper house 30 days to consider it. So the job of the lower house is to pass the budget first, give it to the upper house. The upper house has 30 days to review it, and then they pass it back down to the lower house. And if there's no issues, then it becomes law to pass the budget. If there are issues, the lower house can consider that. But if they don't, if they say, no, we're good with the way the budget is right now, then the lower house holds sway. So they're going to have an election, and they're going to have that lower house finish the election on February 8th, and then they've got February 8th until March 31st to consider the budget. Usually they have, a little bit more than 2 months. This election campaign, eating up probably about 20 days is working days. It's really going to jam the schedule. And this matters because the budget is not the only item. There's a stack of unresolved bills, even from, remember, just a couple of months ago, we were in the extraordinary session of the Diet. This was to pass a supplemental budget and also to consider some of the demands of Ishin, 10 demands of Ishin. We will join you in a coalition, but we want these 10 things. If you do that for us, then we will be joined with you, not in a formal alliance, but we'll vote, kind of as pals. And the LDP decided, yes, we would do that, but they actually never really performed. It got a little bit sloppy towards the end. They did pass the supplemental budget. They did pass a couple of things, but not the important things that Ishin demanded. So front and center on the Diet calendar are these 10 issues that Ishin insisted upon. One of them is the reduction of the lower house seats by 10%, and also indicating that Osaka is the secondary capital. So no movement has been made on that. A lot of promises have been made. So this snap election eats up more of that time. That ball is going to be kicked further down the road. You've got that stack of bills, and it's not just the Ishin promises. There are other bills that were kind of jammed up, stacked up. They had to be kicked down the road. But also in the formal Diet session, there are bills that are standing. They've been waiting. The bureaucracies have been holding these bills. They've been masticated. They've been processed. They're ready for Diet deliberation. They're stacked up in a pattern like airplanes getting ready to land. The airport is now open. They're coming in, and the Diet it'll have too much indigestion to handle all of that. So it's really it's a tough deal. 150-day session by the Constitution. So that puts the Diet to end probably in June, maybe July if there's a little bit of an extension push there. And it looks like maybe that will be required. But that's a lot of legislative work, and everything else is frozen as a consequence of that. So this election compresses governance. It increases risks, and it raises the cost of delay. And this is why the markets have reacted so severely over the last couple of days. So the yen is hovering around 158 to the dollar. And that's about where it was last week, and last week I mentioned it's 158.8, and that was the lowest it's been in several months. So it's still getting hammered. It reflects political uncertainty, fiscal expectations, and election-driven policy risk. So a lot of people are thinking that if Ms. Takaichi has a combined force and she can drive the economy, she can drive politics, then she will be more fiscally responsible. There might be more money available for certain segments of the economy, and so that's what they're looking for. But she also mentioned that maybe temporarily will reduce the consumption tax. It's an 8% consumption. It's a 10% consumption tax now, but 8% on food. So the markets are reacting to that, and they're thinking if there's going to be a reduction in the consumption tax, and they've already spent so much money in the supplemental budget and the defense spending, what is going to happen? I mean, this is not fiscal responsibility as the prime minister said she would be. So it begins to cause a couple of fractures in what the political play is here. So it's a looser fiscal policy or posture, and that could produce a little bit more less predictability. And so, for households, the situation right now, it's got higher food prices, higher energy costs, subscriptions, travel, daily life pressures. The people are spending less, and you can see that. And for politicians, this is narrowing the window before pain becomes anger. So it's an issue that we have to watch very carefully. And combined with the election, you're going to hear an awful lot about it. The other thing, interestingly enough, that's come up is the Unification Church has come up once again, and it's come up for a couple of reasons. That there's no charges, there's no explosion right now, but proximity does matter. And you have to remember that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was assassinated on July 8th, 2022 in Nara during a campaign speech. He was assassinated by a young fellow by the name of Yamagami Tetsuya, who had a homemade rifle that he shot the prime minister with, or the former prime minister. He was sentenced last week to life imprisonment. And this event exposed long-standing ties between conservative politicians and the church, and it triggered resignations. It triggered the collapse of the factional system that guided Japanese politics since the end of the war, and it forced internal reviews, and it permanently altered the political situation, the political norm. So the reason why Ms. Takaichi was elected was because many of the other contenders had dirt on them. They had taken some of the money from the Unification Church, and the population won't stand for that anymore. And Ms. Takaichi was Mr. Abe's closest protege. You'll remember that. But Mr. Abe's faction was the faction that was most closely related to the Unification Church, and that's why Yamagami assassinated the prime minister, because he was somewhat affiliated, and Yamagami was really torn by the Unification Church having, taken all of his family money. His mother donated it to the church, and he was left basically penniless, and he was angry about that and didn't know what to do. He searched around for resolving that problem, and eventually, in a fit of anger, struck out. So the memory of that, Yamagami's sentencing, and also a story that's come up just recently, a little bit of muckraking of Ms. Takaichi being somewhat involved in the receiving end of this huge scandal that's altered Japanese politics. It might be a flash in the pan. It's not substantiated, but it is something that people want to throw rocks, particularly at an election campaign. I think it will die down, but you never know. I wanted to call that to your attention. In other news, as you know, there's been no war announced this week in the Straits, but it is a steady escalation. China continues to encroach on boundaries, on borders, overflights, triggering reaction from the United States and from the Japanese self-defense air forces. And North Korea North Korea has remained quiet, but you never know. It's always, rattling when there's something else going on. So, don't forget me. I'm over here too. We just had Davos, so you might anticipate something of a reaction coming from North Korea. But so far, it's been rather quiet. But the United States is clearly signaling that Japan has to do more. So it's responding. Japan is responding. You remember that the defense minister, Koizumi, visited the United States for a full week 2 weeks ago. And the finance minister similarly was in the United States. Japan is expanding defense productions. It's relaxing export restrictions. So previously, it couldn't export armaments that had offensive capabilities. That's being restricted. Those restrictions are being lifted now. It's co-developing systems with like-minded countries and allies, with Italy and Britain, for example. The next generation fighter jets is well on the way to being launched on schedule in, I think, 2035. But Japan is no longer just a buyer of security. It's becoming a provider within the alliance network. And this is structured and not temporary. So the Japan that we grew up with, all these Japan hands, everybody that's in the audience, we grew up studying Japan as this kind of country, and it is moving into a different kind of country. It's not like it was before. And for example, in Davos, Japan was completely missing. It was essentially absent. This is unusual. It signals that domestic politics are consuming everything in the bandwidth, and economic messaging is on hold. Leadership consolidation at home comes first. Japan is choosing stability at home over visibility abroad. And so you can see that moving forward, and it's somewhat unsettling, but I mean, Japan is focused on what's going on right now. This is a fight. It's a drag-out fight. The next 2 weeks will be really important for what's going on. So putting it all together, the snap election is at speed, broken coalition habits, proportional math, budget compression, and a weak yen have all kind of combined to bring up unresolved historical shadows, not just regionally, but also internally with the Unification Church coming up again, and a tightening security environment. Ms. Takaichi has already promised Donald Trump that this 2% dedication of GDP going to defense, it's going to be accelerated, it's going to be enhanced. Japan is moving very rapidly into that realm. So if Takaichi succeeds, I think Japan will continue on this trend. It will move in that direction. I think the trend is that it's moving in that direction. She is bold. She is really something. I'm really very pleased with what her performance is. There's some things that don't resonate so well with me, and probably with some of you too. But overall, I think you have to give her high marks. If she fails, instability returns. We can pretty much predict that. By the way, when the election starts, she's no longer prime minister. She's also running for office. All of the members of the lower house, they're candidates now. So when the election is finished, the diet comes back. The diet opens. The emperor comes across the moat again. And he goes, "I'm here again, and I have to open the diet. What are you guys going to do?" The first order of business is for the upper house and the lower house to combine once again. They welcome the new members. Everybody gets their badge, and their mother comes and takes their picture of them. They're so proud, but they must elect the prime minister. Both houses elect the prime minister. That's the first order of business. It's not guaranteed that it's going to be Takaichi. So we have to go through this whole process once again. And, well, there's a lot to anticipate. There's a lot to watch. Thank you very much for tuning in to this program. Every Sunday we're here. 5 years we've been doing this, Maya. And since I spend, all of my weekends on the water working, on this magnificent sailboat that I somehow fell into, I broadcast from the boat and then push off as quickly as I can. But 5 years we've been doing this, and I'm really proud of it. It's an achievement that I couldn't have done. Well, I had to do because Maya's there with that big stick and that ugly cat. So Maya, thank you very much. 5 years. Next week will be our 5th year anniversary, and I'm looking forward to the next 5. Oh my God. Back to you.
Indeed. Yes, thank you so very much. And to everybody who joined us later on, please let us know that you have been here by clicking like, subscribe, and sharing these briefings if you believe that they may be helpful to colleagues, family members, and friends as well here in Japan, or people who are interested in Japanese politics and probably are doing business in or with Japan. And yes, also remember that we send out a synopsis, which is the written synopsis of the briefing during the week following the briefings. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you can do that on Substack, or you can let me know that you want to be put on the mailing list. And of course, once again, I'll add you to it. Please also remember that on February 11th, we're going to have a very special guest, Glen Fukushima, who is a prominent figure in the Japan-US relations. He has been working between the two countries for several decades now, and we're going to have him on the podcast on Wednesday, February 11th, where we are going to talk about economy, also research and development in Japan, and many more other trends. This is going to be just 3 days after the election, so it's also going to add another layer of interest to that podcast as well. So, and I want to say also that now we're moving into the Q&A session. We have received already a couple of questions. Feel free to share your thoughts there. Also, Timothy, I noticed that you responded already to two of the questions that came early this morning from Byron. And there is one more question actually from him, which I'm going to read first and then move on to the next questions that have come in. So please listen. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reportedly reached out to potential trading counterparties at the direction of the US Treasury Department on Friday for rate checks, meaning inquiries about the pricing available if it intervened in currency markets by trading dollars and yen. This signals dual concern by the United States and Japanese authorities about the yen. Does this dual interest and potential intervention by the US and Japan mean that there likely will continue to be improvement in the value of the yen over the coming weeks?
That's a little bit over my pay scale, Maya. But I do have to point out, for those of you who are interested in what's going to happen and what is the current situation, we've talked about this before, Maya, that we are all smeared in propaganda and in news narratives that are a little bit tilted for us to think something or to be distracted, and it goes on all the time. So this question about the yen value, it's difficult to say because we don't have all of the information. But if you're following the price of silver, if you're following the price of gold on the international markets these days, you've got to be concerned that there's something going on. This is really shocking. What is going on with these metals, and who is hoarding it, and who is getting out of exposed positions and selling to accumulate real assets rather than paper assets? There's an awful lot going on. One could draw a lot of conclusions from it. I'm not prepared to right now, but I do point it out that people should be watching these other indicia of what's going on truly in the international market that impacts the yen, it impacts the dollar, it impacts a lot of different things. But the currency market and the flow of money, the actions of the United States, just the dynamics, you saw it all unveiled in Davos. The United States is on a roll, and it is continuing to move very aggressively forward. And that, like the president said, it really draws the rest of the world. The global economy is really impacted by what happens in the United States. I don't want to go on and on about it, but it's a good question, but it's something to continue to watch. I'm not going to step out of my bound zone.
All right. Yes. And Byron, thank you for the questions. Moving on now. The next question came also early this morning from Greg, and it is about the 0% tax on food. And I think that everybody's curious what is going to happen there. But Greg's question is, how would the government fund the gap?
Yeah.
Once, right? Wouldn't issuing more Japan government bonds and printing yen just add to inflation, thereby adding to the problem?
Bingo. You're absolutely right. So the prime minister said, I'm going to be a fiscally responsible prime minister. And then the supplemental budget was the largest in history. And she accelerated by 1 year the amount of GDP commitment that she made to the United States to be dedicated to Japan arming itself or for defense policy. And that's a lot of money. So if they also reduce the income, so the way that they pay for that is by tax. I mean, that's the only feature that it has. It has two features, actually. It taxes people who live in Japan, Japanese citizens, people who have died. They have an inheritance tax, a very hefty inheritance tax for the significantly wealthy. But also it receives income from investments that it's made in Japan and overseas. But essentially, taxes how it gets its money, and that consumption tax of on food to drop from 8% to 0%, people would be so happy about that. That would really make a huge difference. But the finance ministry, the Bank of Japan, is going to be really perplexed. How do we cover the shortfall? They're already underwater in terms of covering the costs that they're generating annually anyway. So it's a good observation, Greg, but I don't have an answer for that. If they reduce the taxes that people are going to be paying and they're going to collect to pay for these things, then the debt to GDP ratio is going to be far beyond what 260% is where it stands right now.
Right, close to that, I believe. Yes. And we've got also somebody who commented on, you Sky on LinkedIn along these lines that, yes. And so the question there is, one key point of this snap election seems to be whether the public prefers a two-party system or a multi-party system in the Diet. What are the global trends in this regard, is the question.
So the global trend seems to be all over the place. For parliamentary democracies, for constitutional democracies, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Japan is a little bit strange in that it's not a two-party system, but I think it would be difficult to be a two-party system. The Constitutional Democratic Party and now Komeito are trying to make it that way. It's been a real struggle. The LDP has been so dominant for the last 70 years. It's hard to shake them off of that pedestal. It would be nice to have a two-party system, give people a chance, but people already feel like they have a chance. It's just that they don't have a chance that their party is going to be actually running the government. It's basically a protest vote. But, you never know. Ishin wants to be a national party. They want to essentially and eventually be able to take over the reins of government and to run things. Constitutional Democratic Party likewise does too. But, few people have real credibility to be able to pull that off. Mr. Noda he's the president of the Constitutional Democratic Party. He once was prime minister, so he does have chops. But him having that experience and his party being able to run the government, I think people are quizzical about that. It's just, running a government takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of depth. It takes a lot of, having appointed and worked with individuals for decades so that they know what to do, what to anticipate, how to move things. And when you've got a change of government back and forth, particularly in this culture, if I can say that, in this political culture, that would be a very difficult thing to do. So I don't know. It's very difficult to say. But the person who asked the question lives in Kyoto and is actually, I think, works in the bureaucracy. So you're curious about it. We're curious about it too. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for that. And from Manabe-san, we've got, what articles do we have to watch out for in Bunshun?
That's good. So not everybody's reading Bunshun. Bunshun is the weekly magazine. It's kind of a rag, but a lot of people read it, even though it's somewhat scandalous. They don't. They used to produce, like in the first 3 pages, a picture of a beautiful girl in a bikini, or flashing some skin. Gendai does that. Some of the other rags do that. Bunshun is a little bit more highbrow, if I can say that. They have great articles. They talk about culture. They talk about cinema. They talk about stars, and they talk about politics. And they talk about. They're really digging. They do the reporting that the polite journalists don't do. So we've got to admit that Japan's press is strictly controlled by the government. Not everything comes out, but not everybody toes the government line. There are some newspapers that attack the government. They attack the prime minister. They call it what it is. But Bunshun is a little bit more racy about it. And I think for people who are, I'm not sure. I can't judge too much about the audience. But Bunshun, it's important to read. Every week something comes out. Sometimes it hits on the mark, but it gives you insight and flavor about what is going on politically in the background. And when something comes up, when there's a scandal, usually Bunshun picks it up. If it's not the first or the second, it's right there, and it comes up with good insight and good intel. It pays for the intel. I mean, if you provide, kind of whistleblower information that you would say maybe in the United States, if you provide that information quietly to Bunshun, you do make some money off of it. So it's a very vibrant field.
Right.
Maya?
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that. And also, we've got Hiroaki also saying, and he has a question. Many people insist or warn that there will be a left turn in the upcoming snap election. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, that's a great observation. So you remember in the election for governor of Tokyo, remember that there was a lot of controversy
Yes.
because people were standing on top of bus stops and telephone booths and shouting down competing orators, candidates who are running in the same election district. There was a lot of disruption there. They actually passed a couple of laws to hopefully diminish that. But like I said, this is a knockdown, drag out fight. So you're going to see a lot of people. Their livelihood depends on this. So if you're a member of parliament, and I know a couple who were in the parliament and then they lost and they're running again. When you're a member of parliament and then you're out, you haven't been appointed, you don't have another job. Your job is to become reelected, and sometimes you have to wait 4 years for that. If you're a member of the upper house, sometimes you have to wait 6 years because their election cycle is 6 years. But the lower house is very topsy-turvy, and there is no kind of career development for people who are politicians. They usually write a book, or they make money, or they're in the bureaucracy, and they decide, or that they've been asked to run for an election seat that's tough, and they have some name value, or they have some sort of credibility, and the party might say, and it's not just the LDP, the party might say, if you run, we will help you support the campaign funds for that. So you don't have to pay all of that, but we need you to run and we need you to win. So here's the manifesto, memorize that, and we're going to help you, wear your makeup and comb your hair and do the stump speeches, and we'll paint the campaign truck for you. So stuff like that. And, there's a lot riding on it. Like I said earlier, campaigns are very expensive, and that money comes out of somebody's pocket, sometimes the candidates, but I think more often than not, it's not just the candidates. It's too much money to devote to it unless you come from money, and a lot of candidates do. So we could see a flash of that. We've seen it in the last 2 elections, in the election for governor and also in the upper house election just at the beginning of the summer. So who knows? We won't know until if it starts to arise. we probably won't see it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but as the election heats up, we'll see it as desperation begins to come in, and polls show who's on top, who's on the bottom. It will be a lot of rock and roll.
Right. Yes. So yesterday I took part in an event which was, well, there were other participants who watch Japanese politics very closely as well. And one of them shared an opinion that in this election, of course, we cannot say anything for sure. We don't know what the results will be, but he thought that it is quite possible that Komeito, which was initially intended to lose the most seats, right, with the reform and everything, that Komeito may turn out to be the biggest winner. Because, and then that argument was supported basically by the logic that Komeito has a lot of proportional seats, right? Yes. And very few single seat districts. And that might help actually the party win big in the election. And especially last week also, I want to tie these two together. Last week, after we had the briefing, somebody on YouTube commented, Tatsumasa is the name, the handle name of the person who commented that we shouldn't underestimate the army of volunteers on the ground who help Komeito prepare for the elections, right? So, and thinking about these realities at the moment, maybe, or do you expect that there is, or do you think there is a possibility for Komeito to win big?
So
just a possibility.
That's a great observation. You'll remember that Ishin they insisted to the LDP to reduce the number of seats by 10%.
Yes.
And they wanted it all to come from the proportional representation because that's going to hurt Komeito, their arch enemy, the most. Ultimately, it didn't turn out that way. It's the lower house, the single member districts and proportional representation. So they get a little bit of what they wanted. But the fact of the matter is, as you said, or as the person you were talking to said, Komeito is predominantly proportional representation. That means their branding is very high. So Komeito, the foundation of Komeito is a religious organization called Sokagakkai. So I think it's accurate to say that most of the members of Komeito are Sokagakkai or Sokagakkai leaning, and they ascribe to the precepts of peace and helping the represented and those kinds of issues. It's kind of like the Democratic Party in the United States. It's softer, it's easier, it's not big business, it's not war, it's maintaining the Constitution, that sort of thing. But yes, it could be when the Komeito issues in their newsletter, we need to vote this way. People almost unanimously vote the way they're told to in Komeito. The LDP doesn't have that power. The LDP members are a little bit less aligned. They're a little bit more independent, but Komeito, they vote the way, like you said, it's like an army.
Right. So, okay, we'll see. This election, it's very snappy indeed, as Patricia wrote just now. It's going to be
it's very snappy. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. All right. And then, Peter Pan, who is on YouTube, the handle name is Peter Pan, writes, there has been a piece of news in Taiwan that Takaichi-san's grandfather was an Imperial Army officer. And so this is a bit of news, and basically this has been disclosed on the Japan Today website. Do you think that this will have any effect on the election, Timothy?
Yes, but it might have a positive effect. So what? Many patriots have their family heritage in soldiers and people who've dedicated themselves to defending their countries, and that's true in the EU. My God, Maya, most of the people who are running the EU are they were they were affiliated with the Nazis, in fact, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So similarly here in Japan, I mean, Japan, it was an all-out war. All resources were dedicated to defending the nation. So it's not unusual that people who are in power now have a heritage that goes back that far. I don't think it might have an impact, but I don't think it's always going to be a negative impact.
Right. Yeah, I think it depends on the time. It depends on the context in which event happens. So it's really difficult to say what happens this time. But Timothy, you mentioned
what this, I'm sorry, Maya, just to add on to that, what this says though is that people are digging under rocks. What can we throw? What is going to diminish her? She's on a roll. We need to slow that down. We need to make people think about, she's going to take us down the wrong path. So a lot of this stuff will come up. It's not just the Unification Church resurfacing and the fact that her father or her grandfather was an imperial officer. There'll be many more things that come up as a result of the it being an election cycle.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I think that one of the main concerns is basically the fiscal policy, right? Because last week again, so we've got somebody, well, the handle name is Donald Seekins, and then he wrote that if Takaichi-san wins big in the upcoming election, she will increase military spending in line with the U.S. interests.
Yes, she will.
In Washington, Japan is seen as the tip of the spear aimed towards China. To make the Japanese military and industrial complex grow, she will have to cut back on social and health spending for ordinary Japanese. And I believe that this is a very real concern here because
Yes.
she says, I'm going to be fiscally responsible, but all those policies do not really let's say they are not a good ground for fiscal responsibility given the situation in which the Japan's right state finances are. So it's really a kind of controversial thing because it also, I know that she's got a lot of supporters, which is great, and she has done a lot of good things so far, but there are real concerns there, right?
Absolutely. She is in between a rock and a hard place. No matter what she does, it's going to have an impact. There are consequences to all these decisions. But it is true, the United States wants Japan to take more of a role. And I think Japan has decided we have no choice but to do that. Japan needs to defend itself more aggressively. It needs to be less reliant on the United States. It needs to move forward and recreate itself. It's got a peace constitution, but we don't think that that's going to protect us in a time of potential Chinese aggression. So, and it is true. If China moves on Taiwan, Japan is an island nation that depends on trade. It depends on free and economical flowing trade. It's an island nation that depends on that. So if there's a kinetic action in Taiwan, that will be disrupted and Japan will suffer as a result.
Right. Okay, and Peter Pan, following up on his question, why did it happen in Taiwan? Maybe because this is a country that Takaichi-san supports. Yes, maybe there is something there. Okay, and one more question from this past week from somebody with a handle name I Heart Syntax. Okay, so the question is, in this episode, which is last week's episode, you doubted Japan's hypothetical turn towards Russia and China. The US has turned out to be a fickle, hard to predict partner. Why doesn't Japan move towards the European Union then, Timothy?
I'm stifling a laugh.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to sound too dismissive, but give me a break. The EU has no comparison to either the United States or China, Russia.
Right. That's true, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It's just look at what happened in Davos. So no, that's not even a consideration. But I thought the conversation was interesting last week. China, Russia, the United States, Japan is sitting in between. And the fact that it was defeated in World War II and that the United States, whoom, they came on and they occupied Japan wholly. They occupied it and then released it back. And they did one of the most magnificent things in human history. They allowed the defeated nation to resurrect itself. That is such a magnificent thing. I think that fact alone has drawn all of us here on this program, all of the Japan hands, to this country. That miracle that happened, and we're still wedded to this country and what it's done, and the miracle of that reemergence. So I think that is probably one of the underpinnings of why it's so tied to the United States. I mean, you look at just the economy here and the number of American firms that dominate industry here. They don't dominate it. I mean, Japanese companies dominate, but among the foreign countries, yes, the United States has the lion's share. It's not 50%, but it's the largest proportion of inroads into this country. I mean, it's just almost intractable, the web of connections and feelings and history that exists. It would be difficult for that to be replaced by either Russia or China even in a 10-year span.
Well, I think, it will be difficult indeed, but if the United States continues to withdraw, in the way it is doing now, so who knows what happens in 10 years from this point of time. But we'll see. Okay, and Timothy, yes, you mentioned also that, of course, after the election, Japan will need a new government, and so a new prime minister will have to be voted in, right? Again. And you mentioned that there is a chance, not a very high one, but still there is a chance that it may not be Ms. Takaichi. So what other candidates do you see as candidates for that position if it's not her?
Okay, so she is still the president of the LDP. Being the president of the LDP is not impacted by the election cycle inside the Diet. So when there's an election for the prime minister, the Diet comes together, the upper house and the lower house, and the people who are in the Diet who belong to the party usually vote along party lines. And I think it's inconceivable that the LDP would lose so many seats that if you cast votes for prime minister, the LDP is still going to come out on top. Their candidate is going to be bigger than the candidates that are promoted by the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito. Certainly, Ishin would vote for the LDP. So you've got the Ishin LDP alliance voting for their candidate for prime minister. So the only way that we would consider somebody else is if the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito, they do far better and they get more votes than the LDP, or the Komeito and Constitutional Democratic Party convince the other opposition parties to vote with them after the election, and the combined vote supersedes what the LDP Ishin votes can do. And then that candidate would more likely than not almost certainly be Mr. Noda.
Okay. Let's see what happens then, because I am sure that, yes, if that happens, then we're going to have another very interesting period in Japanese politics.
It's already, I mean, you don't need to do anything to make it any more interesting. It's really epical what's going on now. It is far different than what it was, even 5 years ago.
It is very different, yes. All right, so it looks like we have gone through the questions, the comments as well, to everybody who stayed with us and commented and shared questions on the platforms. Thank you very much for doing so. Again, it is Sunday, the 25th of January, and tomorrow is a bright new week, so I hope that all of you will enjoy the week, will have a productive work week ahead of you, and also please stay with us. Come to the podcast next Sunday again at age 20. Japan time, of course. In the United States, it's the evening before, depending on which time zone you are. And in Europe, it's midnight. So if you are there, you can watch it after you wake up on Sunday morning. Yes. So, Timothy, thank you very much for this briefing once again. I know that you're very eager to continue preparing for the sailing season. So,
does it look like that? I try not to make it so obvious.
well, it looks like you look so happy now. So, right. Okay. So, well, that's all. I hope, Timothy, that you have a productive day on your boat
Thank
as
you.
well.
You too, Maya.
Thank you very much for this. And we'll see you once again next week. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned.